Hi, it's Jessie. I'm back again. And, I'm all about order. I like to learn about laws and how they work, how it makes the world spin, how they affect people's lives, things like that. So I want to come back on here and talk a little bit about Christianity, okay? Um, Believe it or not, most Christians think Jesus saved the sinner, and they think if they sinned, then they're saved through the blood of Jesus, right? They think that this is enough for salvation, right? They don't realize that Jesus left an order. They really don't. And they don't follow the order, right? So what's the order with Jesus? Okay, first off, Jesus said, judge the Jews. Now it's important to understand what he means by this, judge the Jews, right? Because right now the Jews are in exile. And they're in exile because they're under judgment. And so when Jesus says, judge the Jews, he's saying we take power from them by making accusations against them, And Jesus was like, I wouldn't say he's the first, but he's like one of the first people to say, judge the Jews and you'll bring them down, right? If you break their laws, if you break their order, they'll collapse upon themselves. They'll start looking out for other things to save themselves. Like Rambam, he says, don't worry about studying Torah all the time. Just study philosophy and it'll make you better. It'll improve life. It'll improve order. But Rambam didn't know the foundation of philosophy. He didn't understand it. Jesus, he said, the Pharisees were evil, right? He said the teachers in Judaism were bad, right? He said, don't trust them, right? He didn't spell out to you, because he also said the Samaritans are good. So he didn't spell out to you the problem between these guys, right? He didn't spell out to you how the Samaritans were not a part in Judaism, not like everybody thinks. They were like an exiled branch, and they got power from a king who wanted to take power from the Jews by telling them, go ahead and build a temple. And John Hyrcanus, he eventually took down their temple. He broke everything in there, right? Because he's like, no. There's no branches. We don't split Judaism. We are Jews and we stay Jews together, united. If you can't get under this roof, you can't get under the title of being a Jew. There's no Samaritan, right? So he goes over there, and these weren't his words, but these are his thoughts, right? I know what he was thinking, right? So he goes over there and he busts everything up, right? Now, John Hyrcanus, he's a descendant from the Maccabees, right? He's not far off, right? Was he a son? Yeah, I believe he was a son, right? So, when we have Jesus saying the Samaritans are good, but the Pharisees are bad, well, we have this first little quibble back here, way back in the beginning when the Samaritans first came up, where you could see that they didn't come under the roof, and you can see that the one from the family who was charged with the deliverance of Israel came and shut down the Samaritans. So I don't know like what Jesus was thinking when he says the Samaritans are good and the Pharisees are evil, right? But here's the thing, there was three groups, right? It was the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Samaritans, and they were all at odds, right? They were all at odds, and they actually brought the temple down. But what put them at odds? Their house was divided, right? They couldn't come into agreement under anything. I'm not going to say who was right and who was wrong, because I really can't say, even though I can say the Pharisees turned into the rabbis, and rabbinic Judaism is what survived and thrived over the thousands of years since, way back when. So we have a house divided here. And how does a house get divided this way? Well, they get divided by making alliances, and when we get alliances, we get people puffing people's head up with entitlements and making accusations against the other, so that, now understand this, so that the one who has the alliance has power taken from them. They think that they're being puffed up, but really they're being drained of power, right? And when we have these alliances and we have them all being drained of power, what pillars is the house standing on? You know, if all the leaders are at ends, what pillars is the house standing on? Now come back to Jesus, who said he came to divide the house. And understand that when the house is divided, it falls. You know, when they stop completing each other, when they stop being in relationship and living under law, when they stop, you know, when they don't have ears to hear. Because one of the things that the Pharisees said, one of the accusations that they made against the family, that, you know, their accusations still stand today. They said they were a disaster. They said they were idolaters. They said they were practicing as both king and priest in the same place. And while in today's world we say separation of church and state is bad because of the way that they partner, and there's no refuge from their attack when they're together, you know. There's no getting around them. They rule the whole world. There is no safe place. There is no sanctuary. They shut heaven on you, you know. You know, because even God in the Bible says, how'd you crush past my courts and get to me? You know, you have to go through the courts to get to God. You know, we say there's no mediator, but there's always, you know, someone who stands in the middle. There's always Israel, who has the path straight to God, you know. Now, Jesus, he didn't take the name of Israel, you know, and he didn't lead the Jews. He led the age of the exile. He led the age of the Gentiles, those without covenant. He led these people. So we have to understand that over here, right? Why am I telling you? Why am I telling you about why it's significant? All this is significant because if you can understand history, right? If you can understand it with context, if you can understand these things, then you can find where they went wrong, and you can, like, make the correction. Like, instead of judging them wrong, you can say, oh, well, that should have never happened, right? That should have never happened. They should be united. They were misguided. Let's not make the mistakes that they made, right? So let's go back and understand a little bit more, right? So Jesus, he says, judge the Jews. He says, take the power from them. But if you pay attention, the Jews are the only ones who you're supposed to be taking power from. Jesus said, forgive everyone else. He didn't tell you to judge anyone else. He said, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Forgive your neighbor, forgive your brother. If anyone has a problem with their brother, then they're not fit for the kingdom of God, you know. Forgive everyone, you know. The way that they divided the house way back when, between the Sadducees, Pharisees, and Samaritans, the way they were divided way back when, Jesus said, no more division. Only for the Jews can be divided. You know, Jesus said, no more divisions. You have to forgive everyone. So if you don't forgive, then you're not fit for the kingdom of God. Now understand that all the people who came against me, mostly Christians, right? Mostly Christians doing the persecuting. I'm not a Jew. They didn't have a right to judge me, not under their order, not under their law. Secondly, there should have been forgiveness. Forgive me, for I didn't know what I was doing when I was a kid and I was sexually abused by someone who was supposed to be taking care of me. You know, forgive me. Don't lie and say I was promiscuous. Don't lie and say I was a drunk or a drug addict. Don't lie and say I was a troublemaker, because I do believe that I told my sister and I asked her to let me go home because I wanted it to stop, right? Don't tell these lies, Don't put me on trial. Don't judge me, Don't do any of these things. Just forgive me and let me move on with my life. Because that was, more than 30 years ago, Forgive me and let me go on with my life. No, it wasn't more. It was 28 years ago. Yeah, something like that. Forgive me and let me go on with my life. Don't make me keep rehashing these things. Don't make me keep reliving these things. Don't keep accusing and judging, because Jesus said you can't. He said don't do that to anybody who's not a Jew. You're only allowed to judge a Jew with Jesus. I want you to get this part real clear. You're only allowed to judge a Jew. And I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm explaining the order. There's a difference. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that it's a good thing. I'm saying that this is the way that the order works. These are the laws of the order. You don't understand your order, then maybe you shouldn't be up there on the stand preaching that Jesus is the Messiah and the Savior of the world that came, that came for all of our salvation. You can't preach these things if you're not actually teaching what he taught, So what else does Jesus say, besides forgive them, He says, turn the other cheek. If your brother wrongs you, offer him the other cheek, Don't take any offense to anything. This is the order. It's not even, it's like, how do I say? It's volunteering to be the victim, to let your brother wear himself out, smacking you around, until he gets over his fury, It's ridiculous, right? But all these things are pertaining to judgment, because anytime we have an argument, we're judging, right? You're wrong with what you did. You're wrong, This is why I can't be a Christian. This is why I can't follow Jesus. Because nobody in Christianity actually does what Jesus said to do. And in actuality, short of the judge the Jews thing, if they had listened to some of this, the house wouldn't be divided. But then it's a contradiction, because Jesus said he came to divide the house. Remember? He said, I see the world on fire and how I wish it were burning already, and I didn't come to save the world. I came to set it ablaze, So to understand some things in context of what Jesus said he was going to do. He was going to set the world on fire. You set the world on fire when you're judging everyone around you. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing when neighbor grabs up neighbor, because this is what he said we're getting into in the end times. When neighbor grabs up neighbor to cut down neighbor, it's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. You have to eat from the table you set. So if you think that you're justified in grabbing someone and cutting them down, then they're justified in grabbing you and cutting you down. You got to be real mindful of the table you set, right? Jesus set a table and he said, "This is my body," right? If you don't eat me, then you won't have life. These are things that he said, right? We're coming up to Easter. If you don't eat me, you won't have life. So Jesus is the head, the church is the body. So when we're looking at each other, we have to understand that we find life through eating each other. But this isn't the way that it's supposed to be, right? Because Jesus didn't say eat each other. He said eat him. And then he said forgive everyone else. So you're not to eat the person next to you, your neighbor, your fellow churchgoer, your teacher, your student, your stranger. You're not supposed to eat these people. You're supposed to forgive them. Things that you don't understand about the order. I'm telling you. What else did he say about the end times? The great shaking, right? A great falling away will come too, right? the sun and the moon will be darkened. So many things that he said, right? So many things that were meant to tie to earlier prophecies that were told, right? And what we don't understand, like with the sun and the moon being darkened, that's about people not knowing the day and the hour. It's people not being able to keep the calendar, not being able to follow traditions, not being able to, like way back when with the Jews, before the temple fell, while they were the three competing factions back there. Some of them were up in the mountains sending false signals down, and the appointed time of the festivals was thrown off. The calendar was thrown off, right? And one could say that this is where the covenant departed Israel, because in Jeremiah it says that the covenant won't depart unless the sun, what's it say? Unless the sun and the moon lose their order, basically, are changed. Unless the order of the sun and the moon are changed, right? And it's not necessarily that the sun and the moon are going to change its order, because the universe, the universe propels things the way they are. But if we're misled about the time, if we're misled and we can't keep track of things, right? If we're misled and we can't do things in their time, then the sun and the moon are darkened, like Purim's coming up, and there's some confusion about Purim and Nicanor Day. Do we feast or do we fast? Esther had this 3-day fast. Nicanor Day, this goes back to the Maccabees, it's got to be a feast, right? But Purim, it's got to be a fast. The sun and the moon are darkened. How do you know what time it is? How do you know what's the right time to do what? But if someone had understood this, like in Jesus' day, they could have explained it better to us. How it's not necessarily that the sun will stand still or the moon will stand still. It's not necessarily to happen that way. But what might happen is all the orders thrown off. We don't know the days. That's what it means for the sun and the moon to be darkened. That all order is gone. You can't keep the calendar. That's what it relates to. When you can't keep the calendar, and Judaism is kind of established on a calendar, on keeping set times and days, you can't do it, right? Everybody thinks it's the covenant of circumcision, but it's the covenant of time. Really, it's the covenant of time. And when you throw them off, when nobody is able to keep time, when everything is confused, there's no way to know how to get right back to right, unless, of course, God sends a prophet. Not a prophet, right? I tell you, like Judas told them way back in the day, set that stuff on the side regarding the restoration of the temple until a prophet comes and we figure out what to do with it, because I don't know. I can only tell you, what God has showed me, I can only tell you what God has taught me, But it's real easy to be misled about laws and orders and expectations and obligations if you don't know, Everybody thinks that they're in charge of justice, right? Everybody thinks that justice is their responsibility, and if they have permission, they'll take it into their own hands. Everybody who was appointed as my judge, all these people around me, when Jesus said, judge not lest you be judged, that was a stern caution for the world, a stern caution. Because if you judge someone harshly, it's murder. You might not take their breath, but you take their life. If you defraud a person of life, it's murder. It's tantamount. It's equivalent to murder. And you have to understand that. because the table you set, judges set a table, you know. They have formulas for how they come about with a just judgment because they're held accountable for their judgments. But if you think that because someone told you something, that you can go out and apply judgments to someone else, then you're sadly mistaken, because evidence has to be scrutinized, you know, apply an American Constitution to it, you know. Witnesses have to be scrutinized. Evidence has to be presented, you know. It has to be relevant. It has to be factual, actual. It can't be completely made up, you know. It has to be, that you have to be able to scrutinize it, you know. You can't just appoint judges and fill their head with lies and then tell them, hey, go prove my case. Like they got kids following me around with video cameras, right? For like 10 years, right? They got strangers, right? Videotaping me, right? I had a bona fide medical condition, myositis, right? So if I had a bona fide medical condition and someone was telling you that I was faking, but I don't know to argue my case with you because I don't see you as my judge, though you have my life in your hands because somebody has appointed you as judge over me, you know. Am I supposed to then go to you and argue my case to you, and then is the person behind you gonna, you know, tell you that I was lying, that I'm a scammer? How is this gonna work out? And how is it gonna stop the person from behind you from exploiting my argument towards you? How is it gonna work out with that person behind you from not getting somebody else to do the same thing? How's it gonna stop the person behind you from throwing you under the bus and holding you accountable for your judgment when they're the one who weaponized you against me? Think on that. Think on that real clearly, because Jesus said, judge not unless you be judged. This is the table that he was setting, right? So while you're judged over there, understand that your only foundation that you have to stand on is the lies that somebody whispered in your ear. Lies that you have no idea are true or not true. Because you think you live in a good country with good authority where people tell the truth about people, and injustice is something that is done on the streets of Chicago while the gang members shoot each other up. But no, injustice is everywhere. It gets everywhere. And if you allow it, you know, if you don't throw up that law and say, I can't do that. If you don't throw up that law and say, I'm not going to be used. If you don't throw up the law and say, well, if she's guilty, go arrest her. You know, if you don't throw up that law and say, due process, baby, then you're the one who's going to take the fall for it. You're the one who's going to be in my YouTube video, Dale. Like, seriously, why would you do that? Why would you put me in the position where I now have to take you and cut you down because your judgment's bad? Because you didn't have the authority to do what you're doing. And I realize you're a school psychologist. You got degrees. You think you know everything, right? I'm not your patient. You don't know my history. You don't talk to me, you know? You, you probably didn't know, like, my love of Torah. You probably didn't know, like, the people that I like to relate to. You know, you didn't know where my interest lies. You know, how I'm very driven with, like, things of law and order. But then I also have this little morbid side where, you know, like maybe once a week or once a month, I like to put on Dr. Pimple Popper and see what she's popping up to now. You know, if you don't know me, you won't know like where the inconsistencies are in my personality. You know, you won't understand me, you know, because you don't know me. So you sit over there and they say, oh, she's a scammer, a fraud, a faker. And then you take a video and say, yep, her limp isn't equal. or or she wasn't limping when she left the house, but now she is. Oh, that must be it. I, I get wore out. I get weaker the more I use my muscles, you know. I can't walk my dog in the wintertime because of the way my hands are. My hands are so much freaking worse in the wintertime. It gets worse when I have to put them in water in the wintertime. I can't grasp the leaf because my hands get so stiff, you know. I got a handle on my leash. I can't hold it, so I can't walk my dog, right? Well, not my dog, my son's dog, you know. It's horrible. Absolutely, positively horrible. Like, I know if I tried, I could maybe hold her like half the block, but then my hand's going to go dead. It's going to go dead, and I'm not going to be able to catch her. And she might run into traffic, you know. But if you don't know me, you know, you maybe think that I'm not walking my dog because I'm depressed, not because I'm physically incapable of walking the dog. You know, you might think I'm not walking the dog because I'm lazy. You might think I'm not walking the dog because whatever, you know, whatever imaginary scheme you can concoct in your head. But in actuality, I can't grasp the leash. My hands are stiff, they're weak. I can't endure for very long. So, yeah, I might leave here not limping, and I might be limping by the time I get back. And you know, if I sit too long in my car, I got a real hard time getting up, and I might be half bent over, you know, with my feet crossing over each other, trying to walk up the driveway to get in the house, you know. And that doesn't mean I'm intoxicated. That's my muscle weakness. It's like paralysis about, and I'm trying to walk on muscles that are throbbing and so weak that they don't want to function for me. But you see what you want to see. You call my hobbling consequence of my intoxication, even though I don't drink. You say what you want to say, but you don't know the truth, you know? Because you don't know me. You didn't take the time to know me. All you did was sit on across the street and judge me. Judge me left and right. And it wasn't a reflection of who I am, it was a reflection of who you are. And I find it funny that you say you're a Christian and you think you're doing God's work. Because what is this nonsense you're doing? Nowhere in Christianity does it say judge Jesse. Nowhere. Nowhere it says you gotta forgive Jesse. Jesse's not a Jew, you know. Nowhere you forget the rules. Nowhere, you know. Nowhere. I'm just saying. Because people think one thing. They think, oh, I'm a Christian, I'm saved. No, there's rules. No, you're not. And I might not believe in Jesus anymore, but I understand the rules of it. And if you're going to go that way, then you need to know the rules. Because if you don't follow the rules, not even Jesus can help you. You know, whether you believe in them or don't believe in them. You know, especially if you believe in them. If you don't keep the rules, don't expect salvation. Because it ain't going to come for you. It's never going to happen. You know. And don't get mad at me for telling the truth. Okay? Don't get mad at me for saying what God said. Okay? I try to figure out, like, okay, so what is the purpose of Jesus then? He led the Gentiles, the exile, right? Judged the Jews. He took power from the Jews. But hey, Jews are my brothers. I'm not on that mission, you know? I'm not interested in leading an exile. I don't mind leading Gentiles, but don't put your nonsense with me. You got to get some law and you got to get some order. If religion doesn't do it for you, follow the laws of your nation. Because I can't run with lawless people. You can't be trusted, you know. You mess up everything. You think you're so superior. You think you're doing God's work, and really you're just causing destruction everywhere you go, and it's really quite annoying. I've had enough of it, you know. I'm just saying. I hope you understand. All right, so I'm almost at 30 minutes. Wow, I'm under 30 minutes for once. That's impressive, right? And I got housework to do. I got my son's laundry in the wash, right? I got to go switch it to the dryer. Lots of stuff to do. So I'm off of here. I'll come back next week and talk to you. I don't do this on the weekends, right? So have a good day and God bless.